Welcome back to the podcast, and it is good to be here. Got some great news. He's been a guest on this a couple of times. He was a guest host last week, but we are welcoming him here today. Michael Murphy. He is now assuming, I should say, equal co-host. Yay! We got two co-hosts now. Anyway, Michael, just say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody. Glad to have you here.
And it is good to be back. It is. Last week was quite an interesting time. I was in a class for over 10 hours, so I had a lot of brain mush when I came out of there. But
hey, we were talking about some brain mush a little bit with my younger brother being on and talking about Tinder profiles.
How did that go? I wasn't able to be here.
I think having an ancient individual here like Michael with my brother who is a youngin, talking about the state of the dating game, pretty much, and we really covered from a biblical standpoint, what does it really look like to have that going for you, but also asking my brother, what's it like out there, because sometimes it sounds like it's a battlefield, because it can be.
Yeah.
Well, but we were talking about heavy stuff last week, but today we're going to keep it a little bit lighter, I think.
Yeah, we're going to talk about recent events, if I can get my mic to actually cooperate. We're going to talk about recent events that's going on. Give me just a second. Let me tighten this up.
I think what he's talking about is how the Patriots have been doing terrible this season. And
have they done anything since Tom Brady left?
No. They had him come back to say, hey, you're a legend in our books. But that's the only good thing that's happened for them this season is just having Tom Brady show up to say hi. So,
well,
the high point of the season.
Yeah.
I guess we want to talk about something a little bit more important than Tom Brady, but
absolutely.
I was watching Joe Rogan, and
as you do.
And I noticed I can't remember who he had on there, but he was just freaking out over the possibility of World War III. And everybody is. And I get it. There's good reason to wonder about that. But, as I got to thinking, the political left in our country, I'm just going to throw the word out there, right? If you call the Native Americans Indian, they lose their head, right? They just lose their mind. They have a meltdown.
Yeah.
Politically incorrect. And so you got to call them indigenous people. As a matter of fact, I think they're wanting to change.
That was First Peoples Nation, something like that.
Is that it? I thought it was
like
indigenous people.
It'll just keep changing.
So, so that explains why they've allowed it to stay Columbus Day, because I remember at one point they wanted to change it to Indigenous Peoples Day. And so,
why not call it Discovery Day?
Discovery Day.
I mean, the new world was discovered, right? So,
well, yeah, and when things like this happen, I tend to always go to Scripture, to the Bible. What does it have to say about that? And I got to looking at, it comes out of Revelation chapter 12. And what's going on? Well, actually, it goes back further than that. It goes back to Genesis chapter 3.
Mm.
We see where the devil takes on he becomes a serpent, right, in the garden. And in Genesis chapter 3, he says that his head you will crush his head, and the serpent's head will crush his heel. So by Revelation chapter 12, he goes from being a serpent to a dragon, right? We all know him as the big red dragon. And if anybody ever saw the movie Hannibal, you knew exactly what that's what that was about, right? All the Silence of the Lamb stuff,
right?
And that's not what it was about, but that was the persona that the villain takes. So we're not talking about that. We're not talking about anything weird. We're just red dragon was a metaphor that was used, and so. All this stuff that's going on, what was that, a week ago yesterday, that Hamas attacks Israel?
Yeah, we're on day 8.
So for one, this is not anything that just is not normal to happen over there. And it's like, am I saying that it's bad and we shouldn't support Israel? No, we should. And as Christians, we should pray for Israel because, number one, the Scripture tells us to pray for Israel. But I look at that and I go, everybody's freaking out over World War III. Is World War III going to happen? Is it going to occur? And I don't believe so. I've talked about this on this podcast before. I think if we had nuclear war, I think we're dealing with something that even Jesus himself, without getting into too much the weeds of that, Jesus pretty much lets us know that time's going to go as it is right now. But in Genesis, we know that Abraham goes in and he has a child with Hagar, not his wife, but with a servant woman, and Hagar gets pregnant with Ishmael, and that's where all of this is coming from. This is a fallout of that bad decision. And in Genesis or Revelation 12, it says, "And a great sign appeared in heaven: a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon and under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars." 12 stars meaning the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 2 says she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth, which we were talking about before coming on the podcast, where Jesus talks about, he says, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, the end is not yet, but it's just the birth pains. And so verse 3 says, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And a dragon stood before them." Hello, answered the door. Oh. "Stood before the woman and was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it." Now, the third that it's talking about when it says the stars, it's talking about a third of heaven that Satan, we know that when he fell, he took a third of the angels with him.
Right.
So it says that when they fell to this earth. Jesus, or the Apostle Paul says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against every principality." When those angels fell, they didn't go to hell. They fell here to this earth.
Right. That's why we get the term fallen angel.
It's where we get the term fallen angel. And so they became principalities, spiritual principalities. So the whole idea of this, when he calls the devil the red dragon and he's there with the woman, and the Bible says he's there to devour her and the child, which the child is Jesus. The woman's Israel. Mm-hmm. The child is Jesus. He's there. He knows that his defeat was sealed the moment Christ was born. He didn't want Christ to go to the cross.
Right.
So everything that's going on here is that it is what many people would call Jacob's trouble. And the one thing we also know is God's going to protect Israel.
Are you talking about you're talking about right now in Israel?
Right now, yeah, right now. And I mean, because all of these countries, as we were discussing before coming on, and Michael had brought it up, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about it. But the whole thing with the Palestinians, and we can go all the way back to the Old Testament with the Philistines.
Yeah.
This has been something that has went on for not just generations, for
thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking literally a war. And so we look at it, we go, where's the drive come from? Well, it comes from those principalities that fell. They're part of this dragon that the Bible would use as a metaphor. They're part of this dragon with the 10 heads and the 10 crowns. They are there trying to destroy this woman, Israel.
Yeah.
So it's. Am I saying that this could not destabilize the world? It could.
Sure.
I mean, obviously it could.
The potential is there.
The potential's there.
I don't think this is it because, I mean, the Bible says that no man will be able to predict it.
Yeah.
We're not going to know. I will say that it is possible.
Yeah.
Because if you look, and Hamas is being backed by Iran, Iran's being backed by Russia.
Right.
I mean, if you really break it apart, the potential is there.
Well,
Do I think
right.
it'll expand to that point? No.
Yeah.
But anything is possible. I mean,
Because if we historically do what we do, America's going to back Israel. And just as you mentioned, I'm not trying to cut you off. I want you to finish your thought, but I mean, you're right. That's what makes that potential so dangerous, is because America has always pretty much been vowed to defend and fight with Israel. And right now, I think Russia's so tied up with what's going on in Ukraine, they can't do anything, or at least it appears so.
or unless they shift their focus. But
Yeah.
That's the thing, and it's incredibly difficult to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict what Putin's which side of the bed he's going to roll out on, and what he's going to
Yeah.
decide to do for that day. But I mean, the Russians are accustomed to fighting in the Middle East too.
Yeah.
I mean, they fought in Afghanistan. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I said, I think it's possible. Do I think it's probable? No, but the potential is there. But I don't think we've quite reached.
I think
the
China
precipice.
takes advantage of it and attacks Taiwan.
While everybody else is distracted.
Yeah.
But that in turn could that could be another event that catapults us into World War III, because you have conflicts breaking out all over.
Right.
But what we talked about before the podcast, I brought up Luke 21 verse 9, and when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. Like we're commanded not to be afraid. So we just got to roll with the punches. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Right. And you're right. We are commanded not to be afraid. And I think that if anything, it certainly gives us as the church an opportunity to be a light. So when people can say, the scripture tells us to be ready to give an answer to people when they ask about this hope that we have. And of course, I'm paraphrasing that scripture. We have a hope. So, how can we go to bed at night, rest like everything's okay? Because we're seeing the same news as everyone else.
Sure.
We're seeing everything just as everybody else is. But we're actually able to go, well, first off, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
Because my times are in God's hand. But secondly, I'm going to take Jesus at his word. He said the end's not yet.
I have to give a shout out to my mom, because when I brought it up in the family group chat, it was the first thing she said. I said, this is what I said. I said, the more and more I think about it, the more I have to give thanks to God that I live in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I just do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not having to check my ammo in my backpack before I go to work. I'm not having to.
Probably not a bad idea.
No, it's not a bad idea. But my mom's first response before anybody else could get it out there, and this is just the woman she is. She says, "I'm glad I put my hope in God."
Sure. Absolutely.
I mean, that
Well,
was what you were saying, is that where does your hope come from?
Yeah.
And her first response was, "Oh, I'm glad my hope is in God." She could not. When we say pray for Israel, we're also, we're on the same side of saying pray for the innocent people in the Gaza Strip, because there are innocent people who, there are women and children who genuinely, and I'm sure some men, but there are people there who genuinely don't want any of this, and they're in the middle of it. It just sucks.
Yeah.
But that's how the enemy works.
Well, and
chaotically.
I look at it, and first off, when you look at the name, going back to what I said about Hitler, when you look at the name Iran, which formerly was the Kingdom of Persia,
Yeah.
do you know why they changed the name to Iran?
I don't.
Iran sounds a lot like Aryan. So what happened is, as I said, the Muslims were not unfavorable to the Jews, not initially. They weren't unfavorable to Christians. And I believe it was you, Michael, that brought up about the Palestinians and where that word actually comes from. Palestine is not a nation. Palestinians are not they're not actually a people. Now, I think they are recognized by the UN. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but they are not technically a nation or a group of people.
Weren't they part of the Ottoman Empire? Like, isn't that group of people who were settled there, who got pushed out?
No, they
because the Ottoman Empire was pretty much all of the Middle East, right?
You brought this up, and I don't want to jump onto what you were wanting to talk about, but were they resettled there by the Romans?
They originally had not settled there. I tried to do a little research before coming on today. They were nomadic.
Okay.
The Philistines were. So going back to kind of what we touched on earlier, so the term Palestine is a derivative of Philistine, which comes from the Greek term, which I would probably butcher, something along the lines of Philistia or Philistia. But like this conflict or this clash between the Israelites and the Palestinians or Philistines It goes back to Genesis 21.
Right.
It's the first time that you encountered the Philistines in the Bible. David and Goliath. I mean, that's kind of a pinnacle in the Bible where David takes out the Philistine Goliath. This is a conflict that...
Well, you mentioned they were nomads. I mean, many historians have compared them to the middle-aged Vikings as far as, like, they were kind of that same nature.
Yeah, they would raid. They didn't really hold an occupation other than plunder and pillage.
Yeah.
That's how they made their quote unquote living, is by taking it from others.
Right.
But if you look at that, if you look at Abraham and Isaac were the first to be mentioned encountering the Philistines. We're talking 2,000 years before Christ. This is 4,000 years in the making. Honestly, every generation has predicted, this is the end, this is it. Like I said, none of us know.
Right.
We can all look at it and go, well, and that's the thing. War in general, conflict in general, is atrocious.
Yeah.
Innocent people inevitably get caught up in the mix. It always happens that way. I think it's even more so in this conflict because you're not having a uniformed enemy. You've got...
Which we have 20 years of that, without the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Exactly. The problem is the world wants us to fight a conventional war.
Yeah.
But this is unconventional.
Right.
This is not... You've got roving bands of males that they're not wearing a military attire. They don't have a formal military. Everybody keeps talking about war crimes. Well, war crimes are when you have like a nation who has a formal military and they commit crimes and then they're held accountable. The problem is...
So the Geneva Convention rules don't apply to them, correct?
Well, they're not. Yes, they're not a formal military.
Well, wasn't part of the issue, and I'm going off of my mentor, who is a former Marine. He said part of the issue was that you'll get shot at by military-aged men, and then when you go to retaliate, they've already put all their guns away and everything, and they're just walking around with no...
Well, it's what we dealt with in Vietnam. I mean...
So you couldn't engage them is what I'm saying. The issue is that you can't, like he was saying, conventionally engage them because rules of engagement, you can't attack civilians, and if they don't have any weapons or any uniform on, then they're civilian, correct?
Well, I've talked to my dad who was in Vietnam, and he said, the whole time he was there, he rarely ever remembers. He said he can remember engaging in the North Vietnamese regulars, like one time.
Yeah.
The rest of them is what they called black pajama squad, something of that nature, because they all wore those black. They almost look like karate gis almost.
Yeah.
And what would happen is they would come in and they would attack and they'd flee back to Cambodia because Americans couldn't go to Cambodia. Same thing that, it's like you don't have rules of engagement set.
Right.
It's not like fighting the Germans or fighting the Japanese. I mean, there were rules of engagement. So it's like when there's no rules of engagement, anything goes.
I think the big issue that's on the table for a lot of people is you have the people who are pro-Palestine.
Right.
And what they say is, well, where do you think this violence comes from? And, Israel's attacking civilian locations. And then you have people on pro-Israel side who say, well, you smack us and then you run into a daycare center.
Yeah.
And then get mad at us because the terrorists are in there. And we try, I don't know if Israel's tried to communicate to people like, hey, get out of there. We are bombing that location.
No, they absolutely do.
I'm sure they have. I'm saying on both sides, you have these people who, and I think both sides in terms of anybody who's third partying this, I feel like it's all foolishness because you got people who are saying, well, Israel should do this. Well, Palestine should do that. This, and it's like, maybe just let them have the slap fight that they want, because at this point, if you keep pushing buttons, something's going to happen.
Right.
And
I think there's people who want that.
Yeah, sure. And I'm sure people want that. And I guess my biggest issue is I don't understand why people are on the side of Palestine in terms of you guys were apparently from history saying nomadic.
Yeah.
The Ottoman Empire ruled that entire land, and when they lost, the British Empire was able to divvy up that land however they saw fit because you lost the war. And when Germany lost the war, what did Germany lose? They lost a port.
So
they
that
lost a lot of land.
That goes back to what my point was a little bit earlier about how that if you say that the natives were not, or nobody says that the natives here were not indigenous. Okay, no one's making that claim. But they're the ones who are constantly saying we came in and we took the land from them. Right, the white man, the evil white man, took the land from them. Those same people who make those claims are the same people who are saying exactly what you're saying.
Right.
That, Israel is the only true indigenous people in that area.
Right.
Because everybody else that came in there came in as nomads.
Nomads, yeah.
Right? So it's like they're the ones who are saying Israel needs to give up the West Bank. Israel needs to give this up. Israel needs to give that up. But it's going, wait a minute. This land belonged to them to begin with.
Well, it's just going to be like the rights in this country. We'll just take a little piece here and a little piece here. Before you know it, you don't have anything left.
Yes.
Don't give them an inch.
That's right.
I mean, that's
well, and
my
go ahead. I'm sorry.
My opinion on it. But going back to what JaVaughn touched on, the problem is they're playing Hamas. They're doing it quite intelligently in a way because they're playing to our weakness. Us in the West. We have certain things that we find completely inappropriate or off limits.
Yeah.
If we were to engage in a war, we're not going to jeopardize our children.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're using that to their advantage because
right.
they know that we frown upon those kinds of
Yeah.
things. That's why I said we're going to have, and Israel will have an incredibly difficult time fighting a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. They're going to have to adapt the tactics. So we're going to have to change our rules of engagement.
Right.
We're going to have to change the way that we approach it, or we can't win.
Yeah.
Because we will stifle our military might by saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Which ultimately makes the American military what it was never meant to be, and that's the world police. And that is what they want to do. They want to ultimately make the military a police force. And it's like, how many empires have got to collapse before? Oh, that's right. That's because first off, the world elites are evil people. They just are. And what we're dealing with are two different forms of world elites. You've got the globalist elites, the ones that we hear the term Great Reset from. Sure. Which I know we're not supposed to use on YouTube. I don't care. But then the other is the world elites, such as your Putins and your Cheese and your guys like that. And that's the reason why. And both sides make these accusations. So when you get this guy like Donald Trump, who has a working relationship with someone like Putin, well, he's a Russia. He's colluding with Russia. Well, first off, collusion is not illegal. Conspiracy is.
Yeah, you can collude with somebody.
But they've just put a negative stigma on it.
But
the same thing with judgment. One day we will all be judged. Everybody gets messed up about that term, or they're terrified of it.
Right.
Judgment can go in your favor.
Yeah.
You could say, oh, you did a great job. Yeah. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. It doesn't have to be, well, on this date you did this.
Yeah.
We get certain words develop a connotation, and we get
submission.
We get afraid of them.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily represent anything bad.
Yeah.
Well, and because if there was any kind of collusion going on whatsoever, which this is not good, at the end of the day, it's not good. And let me finish this thought out so that I hopefully can make sense of what I just said. When you deal, okay, so Putin and Trump, neither one are globalists. They are, Putin's 100% Russia first, Trump is 100% America first. Okay?
Sure.
They both have two different ways of approaching that. So, Russia first it's kind of more of that. I don't know if it's really the communist style or if he kind of wants to go back to the monarchy style of Russia first, if that makes sense.
I think he just wants it all unified.
Well, he does, but he kind of wants to bring about that former glory of Russia.
The USSR.
Yeah.
Which is why they want, because the former Eastern Bloc,
Yeah.
all those countries used to be part of the USSR.
Right.
And so globalism can't play into that at all.
Yeah, because you can't.
And if you're going to have a stabilized Europe and a stabilized world, you've got to have a strong America. You've got to. Now, I don't think we have to be involved in all the world's problems, but you have to have a very strong America. And so that means it has to be America first. So then you have, so because they are Russia first and America first, there are things that they can come together with and go, okay, we're not we understand that globalism and a global, all these countries are going to do well at the cost of the mega powers isn't going to work. But the problem is that, when we had Trump in, we were energy independent. If we get involved in this war in the Middle East right now, gas prices will go up to $10 a gallon overnight. I mean, no questions asked, because we shut down the Keystone Pipeline.
Yeah, Qatar just said, or Qatar, however you say it, they just said that if things still keep going bad for Palestine, they will cut off their supply of oil reserves to the world. So.
And this administration just got rid of all of the strategic oil reserves, pretty much. So we're out of those.
Yeah.
So we're telling the entire world, just like the guy, was it the defense minister in Israel who said, I hope they don't attack? Trump got blasted for that because he called him a jerk. I'd call him a jerk too. And it's over the fact that, he's just saying, I hope they don't attack the North Bank. Well, that's exactly where they attacked. It's kind of like when we were invading, was that Kuwait we were invading? When Geraldo Rivera was on news, you remember this? And he's down there writing in the sand, and he's like, "They're here, we're here," and it's you just don't do it, but he did. And so if we get involved with that, we are letting everybody know what we're going to do, and we've already shut down our oil reserves in this country. So we have no more control over that. So what you've got is the globalist elites who are now in control, and as far as this country is concerned, so they can make it very difficult on everyone else under their power.
Yeah.
I mean, we think prices are bad right now. And again, this goes to something Bible prophecy talks about. When, of course, I don't think we're at this point in Bible prophecy. But when the one angel talks about, that, bread would be sold for 1/10 of a mine. Well, I can't right offhand exactly remember what that is, but it's so expensive that the average person can't afford it.
Sure.
Which is exactly what happened to Germany post-World War I.
Yes.
Which is part of what, now without getting sidetracked, but part of what led to Germany rising during World War II is because it would take a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah. You'd have children using stacks of money as toys.
Well, there were people that said, like, the working German would go on they would go to work. On their lunchtime, they'd go buy groceries. Because if they waited till they got off work, the prices were going to be doubled.
Yeah.
And there was people who said they went to coffee shops and bakeries, and they would make their order. This is one of the reasons why we do this now, where, of course, it's not so much now that there's a danger of this, but this is kind of where this practice came in. You'd go in and you'd buy your cup of coffee, and then you would sit down and drink it, and then you go pay for it. They wouldn't do that. They'd pay for it immediately, because by the time they were done drinking that coffee, the price could have already went up by 75 cents or a whole $1 more.
Yeah.
And in those times, that's a significant amount of money.
Yeah. It's very much a significant. And so there are a lot of things to be concerned with going on right now.
Sure.
But, and this is what I was saying about, the Germans, the Nazis, but the Nazis went in and as you talked about, when England went over there and they started working to bring Israel back together in that land, Hitler saw what was going on. So he goes over and he starts making all these treaties with the Palestinians. And so at that point, it became a keep them out of this land as much as possible. And if you talk to most Arabs to this day, even Muslims will tell you, we know that land belongs to Israel. So that's never been the question. So the question is, why is it an issue? And what concerns me more than what's going on in the Middle East is the anti-Semitism that we're seeing going on that has been laying underground. And what's really bad.
Where in the Middle East?
No, here in the U.S.
Yeah.
You should see
the
college campuses.
Yes. Let's be honest here. Nobody, I'm not saying like us. This is a general statement. Nobody's liked the Hebrew people.
Right.
Well, and I'm not saying us. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just saying as a general whole in the human history of mankind.
Yeah.
Like all this history. I know he said human history of mankind, but in the history of mankind, no one's liked the Jews.
Yeah.
No one. They've always been spat on. They've always been kicked around. And for what reason? The only reason I can think of is because they bragged a little too much about being God's chosen people. Right. That's about it. But other than that, nobody's liked them. And here in America, for people to and I'm not getting onto you about this, but it is mind blowing to me. People are saying it is surprising me that people don't have anti-Semitism in their hearts, like anywhere, college campuses, workspaces, all that. It's like, dog, nobody's liked them.
Well,
and it's not because
no,
I think it's okay.
I'm not shocked. No. So let me finish out what I'm saying there.
Not you. I'm saying just in general.
I'm not shocked it's there. But like I said about the people that are having a meltdown over, they want the Jews out of their homeland.
Oh, are the same ones who argue.
When you look at what's going on the college campuses, it's Antifa and BLM who are two of the biggest supporters of Hamas.
Which is wild to me. Or some of the LGBT community who genuinely go out of their way for Hamas. And I'm like, pause for 1 second here.
I had sent Thomas a video earlier showing all the demonstrations around college campuses. And it's BLM, Antifa, the Democratic Socialist. The absolute irony of that is...
Because they accuse us of being
You get the people who are quote-unquote anti-fascist are the fascist. Like, do you not look in the mirror if you want to see a fascist? You are the epitome of it.
Well, it goes back to the brown shirts, right? I mean, when you look at what Hitler did with the brown shirts, they were doing all the dirty work.
The young people
for the Nazis.
Running out and doing,
Well, and just shout you down.
Yeah.
And basically, this is what political conversations have become in the United States, where you and I have a differing opinion. I'm just going to sit here and scream, and I'm going to use all the terms, homophobic, xenophobic, misogynist, racist,
and that's even if they even talk to you.
Sure.
Or if they don't just scream at the top of their lungs. I mean, that's become quite common. I'm just going to literally just sit there and scream.
Right.
I think it's just insane to me that people think that it's anti-Semitic to question Israel on anything.
Right.
What's real anti-Semitism is when you are chanting, and this has been happening, when you are chanting death to blank, and I'm not going to say Jews there because I don't want anybody to take our video down, but if you say death to blank, these people in Israel, you could say it there, but you can't say, certain things. Otherwise, it's like, wait a minute, why are we wanting literal violence?
Well, go watch the video that was leaked from inside the Iranian government when they met and started chanting that they wanted our country to meet its demise. And I'll just word it that way so that we can kind of tiptoe around. But I'm telling you, it goes a little deeper than the surface. And that's why I said, and that's the thing that concerned me about releasing this $6 billion to Iran, because where a lot of that money is going to get funneled.
Well, and they've also said that there was a report, I don't remember who it was who said it, but there was a report that some of the weapons that Hamas used were weapons that were gathered from when we left Afghanistan the way we did.
Are we really surprised, though?
No, absolutely not.
What a foolish blunder on our part, which I guess it could be debated, and ultimately Joe Schmo, everyday people will never know. I think that a lot of that was intentional.
I knew it. And I don't do this to me, Michael, because I might go off. But it is one of those things where you think to yourself, oh, was this intentional? Because at the end of the day, the Iran-Contra thing kind of did blow my mind on what we did there with them. Yeah. Because when you sell weapons to them and then they show up in your face, you have to ask yourself, were you doing it intentionally? Did you really think that the guys who have been chanting for our demise weren't going to do this?
Well, you just left them there. Well, who do you think is going to get their hands on them?
Take them?
When the vacuum of power is filled, and you know who's going to fill it. But JaVaughn, our country does the same thing here.
Oh, I know.
Look up Operation Fast and the Furious.
I was getting ready to bring that up.
Where?
Oh, in Mexico.
Yeah,
in Mexico
we're going to release these guns, and we're going to see where they go. Well, then
Yeah.
they land up
What do you
using
mean?
those
Where are they going to go?
Yeah, well, so that we can track them. Okay, that was a terrible idea because all it ended up doing was getting some border agents killed.
Or what about the cowboys in the 80s who dropped off drugs mysteriously in the Los Angeles area? In the
We're talking about Barry Seal,
one of them, yeah. I'm trying
American
not
Made
to.
with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm
No,
just,
I'm not.
You know,
that's
we're all
what I'm
talking
asking.
about those
That's
things.
exactly that's what you were meaning.
But that's what I'm meaning. And yes, you're right. It might be intentional. It might not be. But the thing is that when it comes down to it, people who are listening, don't be surprised when you see anti-Semitism because that's kind of the trend throughout all of human history. And also, don't be surprised when we have another blunder here in the United States happening to get your mind off of this, because this is a real deal, and you shouldn't be worrying if this is going to start World War III. What you should be worrying about is what they're doing off camera, because you brought up a good point. Thomas, you brought up a good point of a different country making a play and a move on another smaller country.
I think a lot of people are just waiting on it to happen.
Yeah. So I mean, we're all getting upset and we're all getting like really angry. Yes, children dying sucks. No one's gonna not. I'm not gonna defend any military that kills children, even if it's my own. I'm just saying. You shouldn't be surprised this is happening,
Right?
because this is the whole Ukraine-Russia thing all over again. Not saying that those things weren't real and people weren't dying, but for all that is holy, that is not the problem. I don't need my gas or my bread going up. Okay,
Right.
I don't need other countries thinking they can bully smaller countries. And yes, Israel is the smaller country. You know why? Because it's them versus every other person in the Middle East.
Well, what do you guys think about the theory that they may be trying to head towards World War to thin out the population?
I mean, anything's a possibility.
Yeah.
That's
if
not,
you
I don't like that answer. Please
Well,
give me more.
if you look at what a lot of elites have said, is that the world is too overpopulated.
That's it.
Yeah.
They're the ones in power that can make these kinds of things happen. It's not going to be us that start World War III, the people sitting at this table. It's not going to be. It's the people that ultimately hold the power that are working behind the curtains, because all the politicians you see, like our president,
I don't even think they're going to be the ones who start.
well,
World War
but I was going to say, you know that he's not making cognitive decisions.
No,
okay, like
absolutely
I
not.
think pretty much the entirety of the world
Yeah.
can see that he's just being propped
Right,
up.
right.
It's the people who run the things behind the curtain
Yeah.
that you don't see that will inevitably jumpstart.
Nobody-
If that's the case,
Yeah.
they'll be the ones to kick it off.
Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. But what the craziest part is that, and I know I usually bring this up somehow. Nobody likes that. But one of the greatest stories ever told was the story of a politician convincing a dunce to give him emergency powers so that he could take over the galaxy in Star Wars. That was literally it. So when people go, man, Palpatine, the Emperor, is a cool character. I wonder where they came up with the idea.
Well, that idea came from. I mean, it's a story, but the idea came from. Rome originally started out as what they called a triumvirate.
Yeah.
They were ruled by three different
Branches.
sectors.
Yeah, sectors, branches.
And so basically, one killed the other two.
Yeah.
And then he had to secure emergency powers in order to keep because at the time Rome was a republic. So it went from, and that's
Then it
exactly
turned
what
yeah.
that's exactly what he mimicked. So I mean, the point being is that art imitates life, right? Or is it the other way around? But life imitates art. I can't never remember.
Art imitates life.
But
right.
I mean, we see it going on, and as you said, I don't even think a lot of the politicians, when you look at a country like Russia, what you get with a country like Russia is you see their elites ruling. In our country, many people want to say that Donald Trump is an elite, but really what you get in our country is there are elites behind the curtain that are pulling the strings.
There are literal interviews with current elites who said Donald Trump did his best to try to fit in, and we just didn't like him. And they're genuinely saying, like, oh, we just don't like him. He was never part of the in crowd.
Right.
They're
Right.
spelling it out for you. The dude's not really an elite. He's
Right.
just somebody with a lot of money
Yeah.
who knows how to play the game, and he
Yeah.
played it well.
Well, and Trump really doesn't. Trump's dad was wealthy, but I don't think his granddad was he?
I don't know about the Trump family too much to say.
Because I mean, there are certain elites that are just looking for the opportunity to get something started because they're the only ones that's going to actually benefit from any of
Right.
this. But I always do fall back that even the elites have to think rationally. And if you just decide to blow the entire world up with nuclear bombs,
Yeah, what are you going to have left?
what are you going to have left? What is there to control? I could see them maybe detonating a few places, but all in all, if you destroy the world like the old 1980 film, I think The Day After was what it was called. If you do that to that level, what is there to control?
Well, and when all the land's uninhabitable and you can't grow anything, what good is it?
Yeah,
Right. I don't think anybody who is in charge and has real power is thinking, oh, let's just blow this place up.
Right.
That's a crazy person, right?
Yeah.
That would be somebody who plays the system, becomes an elite, and then sits there and goes, hey, by the way, I just wanted to see this place burn. But nobody's, as a group, it's very easy to keep each other in check. Like if we were the elites here at this table, us three, if Thomas was saying, hey, I wanted to blow up, this part, and me and Michael said no, I mean, that's just kind of how it runs. And people would say, oh, you guys are just crazy conspiracy theorists. And it's like Germany, emergency powers to Hitler.
right.
All right. Napoleon rose to the top by making sure people were afraid and having things in order. And then he just stepped up to the plate and took over and had his days. And
That's
in
what
Russia,
I'm saying. Fear's a great tool. And
right.
Well-
And Russia did. We saw individual countries do it. Why is it so hard for people to believe that a group of people, different backgrounds, religions, and all that type of stuff, come together and go, why don't we just run the planet?
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, I mean,
Right.
that's what I mean is, again, I mean, I do believe that there's going to be an antichrist that's going to step on
Sure,
the
yeah.
scene, that's going to control everything. And again, one of the reasons why I don't believe there's going to be this nuclear war that's just going to destroy everything, and I know people that don't believe would say, well, if you can prove that to me, I'd sleep better at night. But I wouldn't, considering that he's going to be far worse than a nuclear bomb. I mean, if I had to live under the Antichrist's rule, I would be voting for the nuclear bomb. But he's going to have something to control, and he's going to have something to control with. And that's why it's just going, okay, it doesn't make sense coming from a Christian standpoint to go, oh, yeah, the world's just going to explode. Now, God will destroy it.
Sure. Yep.
But just for somebody to fire off a nuclear bomb, I'm kind of on that going, I don't see that happening.
Oh, no, it'll just be another pandemic.
Yeah, that's
Because they use that to grasp a whole lot of power. There's been several instances in my lifetime that I can think of. The Patriot Act is one, where, it gave the government far more power than they were supposed to have.
Yeah.
Our Constitution doesn't delegate, like, how much power the government has. It's to limit the power of the government. The problem is every time you have an event like that, it's a grasp for power, and they don't ever give it back. Once you give the government more power, they don't ever say, okay, well, we no longer need this. It's, well, we need a little bit more and a little bit more. That was the whole purpose of founding this country. That's what the founders wanted, was to get away from that idea, is to limit the power of the federal government. And we see the entire world doing this. I mean, there's examples all over the world, but COVID, the whole thing with COVID, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. You can't go to church. You can't meet in person. You can't, come on.
Well, then that was a big overstep. I mean, even, was that Justice Scalia who told him, he's like, hey, this is separation of church and state, and I look at certain things like, you mentioning that there are powers that they take and then they don't give them back. And one of them is is the income tax. Why do we have the income tax? We have the income tax because we've got to have a military that we can just put on a field at any time we want to, which was ultimately that was the whole point of having the military industrial complex. And ever since we've had the military industrial complex, going back to what we were talking about earlier, we have decided to be the world's police with our military. And they wanted to use, and I think the Oppenheimer movie I haven't seen it, but I think it kind of alludes to this, that, oh, well, we've got to have the nuclear bomb because if we don't, then Russia's going to get it, Germany's going to get it. And the truth was, those guys were being lied to because neither country was even close to getting the nuclear bomb. So you go, okay, well, if we were that close, if we developed it, which we did, obviously, and then later find out that Russia and Germany weren't even close to having it, how did Russia and Germany get catapulted to getting it? And these are the questions that I go, why have people never asked themselves these questions?
Well, it's a lot easier to just
Because it's a lot easier to be a sheep and just
and
mosey on about life.
Yeah.
And I do hate that term. Like you're a sheep. Wake up, people. But the more and more you do dive into this, I once had somebody tell me that JFK was just by happenstance some communist who hated JFK and wanted him dead. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to go into detail. You got to be pretty ballsy to think that he just happenstance by some random communist in the United States
Using a Mannlicher auto.
Yeah.
That's the most comical part. Using a junky rifle.
Yeah.
Like
It's not even just the junky rifle. This is the height of the communist scare at the time.
Shot
correct?
by a Marine who was mustered out of the military.
Right.
well, who had gone to Russia as a quote unquote defector and stayed there and then came back and had no repercussions whatsoever. Well,
That's what I'm saying.
we're
If
going to get totally sidetracked, but the
if it-
CIA had contact with Oswald, which they had originally denied, and then evidence came out.
But you want to know
that-
what? It is a bit of a sidetrack, but it's not, because JFK was another America First president.
Right. He was, well, again, I remember telling this person who I'm sitting there talking with very loudly, and I'm saying, you're telling me that the man who had enough power to just say, I'm going to downsize the alphabet mafia, the group of, the CIA, the FBI, all that, I'm going to downgrade that because we don't
Well,
need
Hoover
that.
didn't like the Kennedys. J. Edgar Hoover, he didn't like the
No,
Kennedys.
Hoover didn't like a lot of people, and he used, like what they're doing now, used the FBI as a political extension and just kept files on everybody. So they knew all your dirty little secrets and then used that as leverage.
Right.
Well, when I want something forced through, I'll just bring up this little folder here, and that's how it
You may want to
strong-armed.
rethink this.
Yeah, strong-armed everybody into making the decisions they wanted.
But see, another good quote from Star Wars is that those in power are afraid to lose it. And when you have somebody like a JFK come out and say, listen, I want to get rid of the CIA and all of their power, and you don't think it's suspicious that 6-7 months later he is now the front page?
Well,
And so
that goes back to why, and of course, right now this podcast is very small, but, I don't know what it's going to do later. I want to see it grow, obviously. But at the end of the day, an American president can only do so much. Obviously, she's got enough power to remove certain people out of power. But if we really want to see a balance of power shift, it's going to have to come from Americans who are being taught, hey, you guys have been lulled to sleep here. You guys are not being told. Your civics class did not tell you this. They didn't tell any of us this. Those of us who know it had to go and learn it on our own. And so, I look at that and I go, Lincoln, another American first president, he was assassinated. Kennedy, American first president, he was assassinated. There was not a physical assassination on Trump, but there's certainly been far more than a character assassination on Donald Trump. So, the political elites hate country first anywhere. I say America first, but
it'd be the
Putin's
same
not a good guy, but Putin is not a global elite.
right. It'd be the same as if, a Nigerian president was like, okay, I'm going to focus on Nigeria. What happens to that guy? Because it's Nigeria, nobody thinks about it. But think about the African countries who are saying things like, okay, I'm going to focus on my country right now. And then what happens? They start doing well. Mm-hmm. They start doing Nigeria, nobody really talks about this, but Nigeria is a beautiful country. It's
Right.
it's a well-established first world country that nobody even talks about.
Yeah.
But you know why? It's because they're not allowing just anybody to show up. They're not allowing anybody just to, take away from their heritage of
Right.
being Nigerian. Nigerians are some of the most prideful of their own country I've ever, which is always funny to me because of the Nigerian prince joke.
The
It's like,
scams.
yeah, but Nigerians will come over to the United States and pay for college to become doctors. They're some of the smartest, wealthiest people in the world. And it's all because they take pride in their country.
Right.
Which is what Japan's doing.
Oh,
Japan's very strict on what they allow or who they allow to come into their country.
But they are having a birth rate
Yeah.
drop off, though. And that is a problem.
And that's becoming a problem in Russia as well.
Yeah.
Because almost all, I say almost all, there's a vast number of countries that are facing that same problem where the birth rate has slowed down to the point where they're going to have more old people than young people, and their population is
In Russia?
yeah, Russia, their population's imploding.
Yeah.
They've done so much damage to their population that
Right.
they're almost in a tailspin they can't pull out of.
Well,
which,
communism really is what put them in that.
I mean, when you
Well,
kill 30 million of your own
yeah.
people.
Yeah.
The United States problem is that we have been ingrained in our minds growing up that having a child is so detrimental to your own personal life. And since we're all in America and more inherently selfish and less family oriented, a lot of people my age especially are just saying, I'm not having kids. It's not that people can't. It's that people choose not to.
Well, in America, it's always been because I've been reading this book, Team of Rivals. It's about Abraham Lincoln and how he picked his cabinet, and even going as far as back then, one of the things that Abraham Lincoln wanted to wait off on marriage. He wanted to wait off on having kids because he was a lawyer. And so he wanted to get his career established, which the scripture says, okay? Proverbs says, get your outdoor work done first. Bring in your crops. After that, then build your house. So even with God, there is a process because, even God does not want, or God, I'm not going to say God doesn't want, because I can't, but even God is like, hey, you've got to be able to support who you bring into your life.
yeah.
He laid out a foundation for how to do it.
Yes. But where we have gotten into with this country is, like you just said, having a kid is more detrimental to people than it is helpful to people. Mm-hmm. And of course, with Russia, of course, again, we're going right in. Many of them are going right into the laws of socialism and communism. And when you look at that, that's one of those things that promises all this great stuff but can't deliver.
No.
And so that and we you talking. And this is kind of bringing us back to where we were on the original conversation with the globalists. Again, just like the Philistines showing up in Genesis chapter 12. 21. We see globalist elitism show up in chapter 11 with the story of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Because the Bible says that they were of one language and one mind. And the Bible says that Nimrod was a mighty hunter of men. Now, that translated, what that's saying is that he was a harvester of souls. It was not a good thing that he was a mighty hunter of men. It was meaning that he knew how to bring people to him.
How to draw men.
How to draw them. And so, what did he say? Let us go. Let's build a tower. Let us build it to the heavens. We will make a name for ourselves. Mm-hmm. That's what he says. Let us make a name for ourselves. Why? Because if you make a name for yourself, everyone knows this. If you make a name for yourself, you make yourself stronger. You make yourself less vulnerable. And so here's this guy who wants to take these people, build this tower, and become the most powerful person on the planet. Mm-hmm. So we see the first globalist elite, we see the first entrance of that Antichrist spirit enter into the world arena right then and there. And so all we're doing is we're seeing it come right back around. We're seeing it come right back around to where it was in Genesis chapter 11. This is something that it's not stopped since the fall of man in the garden.
The elitism that a lot of people hear of sounds like crazy talk.
Yeah.
We're not talking about some mischievous person twirling their mustache and looking at a crystal ball or anything.
Yeah.
We're just talking about humans
Yeah.
with power.
Right.
Because humans with power will use that power eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually, not like right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
But George Washington knew this, and that's why he did not want the seat and said, I'm not going to be a king. I'm not going to do this, because he knew that power would corrupt him. And what you see in the world, in America, local governments.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, you and I were both working for a police department. I mean, even the local government was not the prettiest thing to look at. And that's not even global power. That's
Right.
just, I can enact these things. I can do these things. I can take this away. I can give it to you.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, it goes down to a minute scale.
Right.
POAs, HOAs, and you can't do this. Your yard has to look like this.
Yeah.
You can't have your bushes like that. You can't plant this tree. You can't.
why? Because they don't like it.
Well,
and
and
that's
it goes
not a
to
good
show
reason.
you. It goes to show you when people say America's a democracy. No, we weren't founded to be a democracy.
No.
In a democracy, you can do exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
You can have the HOAs and the POAs. In a republic, I shouldn't have land taxes. That's what a republic does. I don't have land taxes. I go, I buy the land, I pay it off. You can pay your house off, but guess what? Don't pay your land taxes. They come and repossess
Right.
everything.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of got started on it earlier, but the whole taxation issue. So you have to pay income tax on the money you earn. And then anytime you spend that money, you pay another tax.
Right.
And then you
Right.
pay,
Right.
like, you're taxed to no end. That's not what they envisioned.
Yeah.
You know, we had a revolution over a couple cents tax.
Yeah.
And here
Yeah.
we are, like, you're taxed out the wazoo from the get-go.
Yep.
You're taxed when you die. You're taxed, you're taxed when you're living. You're taxed when you're dead. I mean, it's gotten out of hand. But it's to feed that hungry government that we've allowed to grow.
Yep.
Something that the way we glimpsed or kind of glanced off of it, but the country was founded as a constitutional republic.
That's right.
And anything not delegated in the Constitution, that's why we have the 10th Amendment, was left to the state. The states were to determine the laws that weren't specifically outlined in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And we have gone so far
Right.
off, because the federal government now, and just executive order,
Yeah.
or they'll just do something to override the authority of the states. We see it on a global scale, but I mean, all the problems we talk about happening in other countries are happening here too. It's just not as abrupt. It's more subtle.
Yeah, because we're so wealthy that it's been able to be covered up.
Well, and here's the thing. A large portion of the population is happy as long as they can get their coffee and they've got their car and they've got their iPhone.
Yeah.
They're oblivious to the rest of what's going on around them.
Right.
And they've been lulled into this, once again, by the elite. Put shiny things in front of them, and it'll keep them happy, keep them distracted. And that's a tactic that's used, but the Romans used it. I mean, this is thousands of years in the making.
Well, I had a Western civilization teacher, and I know we're coming to the end, but I had a Western civilization teacher in college. And I remember Dr. Bowles, and his first name was Clint. And he said he was in college when Vietnam was going on. And he said he was at his uncle's house, and his uncle had been in World War II. And he said we were watching, because I think Vietnam was the first war that there was actually embedded reporters.
Yep.
And he said, which we know because, not Tom Brokaw, but God, what was his name? But shouldn't be forgetting his name. He's coming in every night, and they're reporting all this stuff, and of course then you've got the hippie movement and the whole baby killer thing starts. And he tells Dr. Bowles, he's of course he calls him Clint. Of course this is before he had his doctor too, but he tells him, I said, man, that's awful, them killing kids. And he said, Clint, we did the same thing in World War II. He said, the only difference was, he said, we didn't have reporters. He said, because he said the Germans would put 12-year-old kids up in bell towers to shoot and snipe at us. And he said we would shoot and kill them before we realized even what their age was.
Mm-hmm.
He said if the same media would have been running the agenda then that they're running now, he said the American people would have turned against the World War II veterans too. He said because he said unless you've been there, you don't know what atrocities can be made. And he said when you're under fire, you've got to protect yourself. And that goes back to what we were talking about with Israel. Going back to it's like going, if Israel's going to go into Gaza, it's going to be reported very negatively.
It is.
But it's going to be some things that's going to have to happen, unfortunately, because Hamas does have to be dealt with.
Absolutely.
Very true.
Like I talked about before, inevitably, there are people who get caught up in the conflict who have nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Every conflict in human history has had innocent casualties.
Yeah.
Those are going to occur. Now, the only time I don't like it, but the time I find it the most unacceptable is when you blatantly attack civilians. You're not trying to make a concerted effort to not
That's right.
take innocent lives.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Hamas is doing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the antithesis.
Yeah.
They are purposefully targeting the weak, the vulnerable. It's grotesque. Some of the stuff that's going on, I feel, I guess, absolutely disgusted by what they're doing to babies.
Yeah.
But, this is no different than my grandfather was a Marine in World War II, fought against the Japanese, and they showed him video of them bayoneting
Children.
infants.
The
And so-
Japanese.
And so my grand, of course, it was indoctrination. You gotta, but
Right.
part of that is you also have to know what they're doing, so that you understand what
Yeah.
you're fighting against. But some of the things that they're doing is just downright cowardly
Yeah.
and disgusting.
Well, and two, the difference is, and if you've ever seen that series, it's a miniseries. It came out the same. Well, it's actually done by the same people, Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers Pacific.
Pacific, yeah. And that's really where that term came from, because the Marines are the ones who coined it, kill them all. Could you imagine going into combat with that mindset now? Oh my God, the political left would lose their heads.
Right. Well,
But at the same token, as you said, I mean, you've got to go into it with that, kill them all. One of the things they train you is, aggressively attack your enemy and violently kill them. Does that sound nice? It's not nice.
it's not supposed to
But
be.
war's not nice.
Speed and violence of action.
That's right. And so you're going. You look at what's going on with Hamas. How exactly is Israel supposed to deal with a violent group without the understanding they're going to use human shields?
A lot of people who will fight against this are the people who were never spanked as a child. Listen, when it comes down to it, reality is this is an adult spanking.
Yeah.
An adult spanking is your life is forfeit once you do something as foolish as this.
Right.
Meaning your son does something like he lies, and he does it again and again, and you're like, okay, listen, because you've been lying, I'm not saying this is what you do as a parent, but you spank them or you discipline them, and you smack their hand, or you do something to make them realize there is consequences that are painful in real life, and i.e., if I strike someone down and I run into this church, and then, the United States is like, hey, you guys have a known terrorist in your building right now, get out, and none of you guys get out after they have told you listen, he's killed thousands of people, he needs to die, and you guys don't give me up, or you guys don't leave the building,
Right.
your consequences are being associated with me.
Yeah.
My consequences are knowing that I got innocent people killed. And the humanity is lost on me and my associates when they say, let them die.
Yeah.
And that's what Hamas does. You'll see Hamas bomb Israel. Then Israel goes, okay, listen, we got to bomb that. Where are they at? A daycare?
Yeah.
All right, please get your children out of here. We are literally sending you messages over the loudspeaker, speaking your language, telling you to leave. Okay, here comes the spanking, which is our missiles. And unfortunately, their children are dead.
Yeah.
Nobody, and I don't think anybody in America looks at that and goes, oh, Israel, nobody's sitting here thinking Israel's okay with that. We're not okay with that.
What was that, last year or the year before, that Israel killed that high-ranking Hamas leader? But they didn't kill anybody other than him.
Right, they didn't kill anybody.
Remember, they found out what tunnel he was hiding in.
Right.
And same thing that Trump did with the Taliban or the not Taliban. Who's the other one?
ISIS
leader. You know, when he pulls all the Rangers out, he pulled like 1,200 of them out.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gets comfortable and comes out on his balcony and they blow him
Yeah.
up. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that America's not guilty of some atrocities. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that America's not done some things that you're going, man, that's boneheaded.
Yeah.
But by and large, America has always been, we're going after, you know, I mean, that's like, you know, like the Israelites have a bomb basically that can fit inside of a person's cell phone.
Mm.
That's so that when the person answers the phone,
Boom,
it kills that one person and nobody else.
Yeah.
But you know, going back to your topic, name a nation that doesn't have some blood on its hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're human beings. We're all of a fallen nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's inevitable.
Well, let's go back to Abraham. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that all countries have made mistakes. The difference that I think really sets the United States and some of the West apart is we make a concerted effort to minimize the civilian casualties.
Yes.
That's why we have smart munitions, laser-guided bombs.
Mm-hmm.
We have all these things to try to minimize the collateral damage.
Yes.
And then you fight an enemy who cares less about collateral damage. And that's why I said it's so detrimental for us and the mindset that we have, as unfortunate as it is. They're going to purposely use those as a weakness against us. You know, we don't want to do those things, and they're going to exploit that.
Right. No, you're right. And so, you know, one of the things I want to close it out with, going back to, you know, if you go to Genesis chapter 34, Dinah, who is one of Jacob's sons or daughters, is raped. And the man who actually rapes her, and this is he actually falls in love with her. And she agrees to marry him. It's a weird sounding story. She agrees to marry him. And so Jacob and her parents come together and say, okay, here's the only way. And this is going back to what you're talking about, blood on their hands. This is the only way this can work. Your sons have to be circumcised. So he agrees. They're all going to get circumcised. The scripture tells us that while they're healing from this circumcision, Jacob's sons go and completely annihilate them off the face of the earth. And when Jacob hears of this, he says, do you understand what you've brought down upon my head this day? Because they never forgot. And they still remember that to this day. Hey, this is what you guys did to us. This is the reason that as Christians, we are called to peace. Now, we are able to defend ourselves, but we are called to peace.
But vengeance is the Lord.
Because he's the only one who can carry out some kind of revenge, and it doesn't blow back on us.
Right.
Right? So it's like this is why, you know, this is why what I wanted to focus on was, the world is burning down. I'm not going to deny that. But I'm also going to say there is hope beyond that. There is hope that we can place our hope in a God who's got it under control. He sees it blowing, he sees it burning down, but it's going in his timing. He's not causing it. He understands people are evil. He understands that. But he also understands that he sent his only son to die for our sins.
Yep.
He also understands that the Apostle Paul was just like these guys that are with Hamas towards Christianity. And we don't know who that person could be that Christ is able to show himself to. And all this stuff kind of, you know, but at the end of the day, this is where it's got to end. I mean, this is, you know, as you said, I mean, this is kind of bringing everything on the timetable of God when it comes to bringing about the orders and events that have got to happen.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why you got to rely on. I pulled up Philippians 4:7, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Put your faith in the right place,
Right.
and no matter what happens in the world,
That's right.
you know that you're taken care of, and
Mhm.
ultimately, you'll come out of it. You know, even if we were to die.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to paradise.
Yeah, that's it.
In the end, when you remove that fear, you have a totally different perspective.
But I would say this too. One of the differences with Christianity versus Islam's idea of paradise if we lay our lives down, it's to lay our lives down for others. We're not dying to go to paradise and trying to take as many people with us.
And I'm also not trying to take a cut in line.
That's it.
I want to live a full life.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
if my time comes, my time comes.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. That's the difference. That's what people don't understand about Christianity is that, we're willing to lay our lives down if necessary, but it's for the betterment of our fellow man. It's not to hurt people, and I think that's just because there's this attack on anti-Semitism right now. Make no mistake, at the end of the day, it is what Revelation would call that red dragon, and it are those angels, and they are those angels that fell with him, that are in control of this present world. The Bible tells us that. And so they don't just hate the Jews. They hate anyone who believes in God and his son, Jesus Christ. That is the bottom line. But that's why Jesus said, be of good courage, for I've overcome the world.
I think this has been a great exchange. I'm very glad that Michael has now joined us officially.
Yes.
And everybody, if you have been listening, we hope that you guys are keeping not just Israel in your prayers, but the people caught up in this conflict in general. We will be praying, and we just really hope that everything is handled amicably eventually. But it's like Thomas said earlier, it's on God's timing, and that's what we as believers look forward to. So, Michael, you want to say anything before we head out?
Well, I was going to leave you with one more scripture. So John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Right. And that's the absolute difference between Christianity and Islam.
Yeah.
I would lay my life down for another person.
Yeah.
They do it to purposely take other people out.
Right.
Like that. I don't seek conflict, but if conflict comes to me, I'll handle it appropriately.
Yeah.
I hope that never comes. I hope that the world, the thing is, in order for the Bible to be fulfilled, we know that these things have to happen.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you rely on the right things, then you don't have to worry about it. You'll get a peace and that's what will draw other people in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're going to look at you and go, well, how can you be so calm in the midst of the storm?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And so if you focus on the right things in your life, you put your focus on Christ, you will be okay. Things will work out, and you'll find that you live a much more fulfilling life.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks again, we're glad to have Michael on as a permanent co-host now, and thank you again for coming back this week. We will see you next week at the Exchange Podcast.